This is the Mind Body Detox Podcast, where we discuss all things integrative health and wellness, interviewing folks from all over the world, sharing insights and wisdom on how to live a healthier life in mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. I'm back again with our special guest, Dr. John Neustadt. And with all of your comments and the questions, we are really, of course, excited to present another opportunity to learn from the wealth of knowledge that Dr. John holds. And specifically today, we're going to talk about sleep health. So for those of you out there today, if you have any issues with sleep health, we're going to talk about the common sleep disorders or problems. Is it common for people to have sleep issues and not have it? We're going to talk about that. Any underlying health problems you may have that may contribute to it. And of course, since Dr. John is working with functional medicine and he is a naturopathic doctor, we're going to talk about some different maybe sleep tracking devices, supplementation, diet, anything that's lifestyle related that can support you on your journey. So first off, Dr. John, if anyone has not heard your last episode, we had you on talking about reversing depression and anxiety with functional medicine, with the power of functional medicine. Of course, I recommend everyone to go listen to that episode, but if they have not, give us a brief introduction about your background and who you are, just so we can get a reminder too if we haven't listened to that episode in a while.
Thank you for having me on it again. I love sharing what I've learned, and I hope that it helps your audience. People who listen to this, if they want to learn more about me, they can go to my website. But just in brief, I'm a naturopathic doctor, as was mentioned. My background in integrative medicine has allowed me to evaluate both the conventional and the alternative research in various areas. I've written over 100 research reviews. Elsevier, the largest publisher of medical research in the world, once gave me an award of being the top 10 cited authors for my work. I've worked with the FDA on the orphan drug side and applied and gotten multiple orphan drug designations for the potential use of natural products to potentially treat rare diseases. Because I needed nutritional supplements that didn't exist in the dose or combination that I needed to help my patients in my clinic, I went ahead and started a dietary supplement company to fill that need. I lecture frequently at medical conferences. My book on osteoporosis, Fracture Proof Your Bones, A Comprehensive Guide to Osteoporosis, was just published last year, and I'm on the corporate advisory roundtable for the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation. Part of that, within that realm of my research and interest, is functional medicine, is sleep, is depression, because those really cut across so many different disorders and issues that people are having. So I'm excited to be able to address particularly sleep today.
Yeah, we talked about last time some of the foundations, for health in general, and sleep being such a really big one that I think that it just goes missed. So how many people are really struggling with sleep disorders or sleep issues in this country? What are some statistics?
So what we know is that as people get older, they're more likely to struggle with insomnia and other sleep disorders. And we're talking about, tens and tens of millions of people. What happens is, people tend, I think, to think of sleep as this catch-all phrase, but it's very nuanced. And so the most common sleep disorder is insomnia. That is difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep due to causes other than sleep apnea, for example. Sleep apnea is the second most common sleep disorder. And sleep apnea can be caused by, there's either central sleep apnea or peripheral sleep apnea. So sleep apnea is where you stop breathing. Typically, people may not even know that it's happening. Their partner, if you sleep with somebody in your bed, they can oftentimes let you know and ask them, if you haven't, do I stop breathing? Do I gasp for air during the night? That can be an indication that you may have sleep apnea. And there's a specific workup for that where you go into a sleep clinic where they can diagnose it. There are some apps now that are being touted, but I don't know that they're FDA approved yet to be able to diagnose you at home. There are companies that are doing home monitoring though, so you don't have to necessarily go into a clinic to do that. And so if it's not sleep apnea, it can also be caused by restless leg syndrome. that can create difficulty sleeping. Oftentimes, sleep problems can also be early indicators of neurological disorders like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. And that could be sleeping not enough or sleeping too much. So not all sleep disorders are about not getting enough sleep. There's also what's called hypersomnia, or people sleeping too much. And so there is a sweet spot. There is a healthy range of sleep for optimal health that has been identified for most people. And if you're outside of that range, it could be that you are struggling with one or more sleep disorders.
Well, it's interesting because I'm a licensed massage therapist, and one of the things I encourage people out there who are also therapists is to kind of pay attention to your clients, because I've had multiple clients that have come in that they're during a session and we're working on them and they actually stop breathing and they had that sleep apnea symptoms and they weren't aware of it. Maybe they don't have a partner or their partner didn't notice. And I noticed that for them, as their tissue, their physical tissue, their muscular, their structure, it really seems to tend to have a lot of inflammation. They struggle with dry skin. They have a lot more, it seems like a lot more health symptoms. So I want to kind of ask you, from your experience and from the research, what are the symptoms or the health effects of having sleep either being disrupted or not getting enough sleep or even getting too much sleep? What are the health issues we might be dealing with that we don't maybe associate with our sleep issues?
There's a wide range. And what we do know is if people are getting less than an average of 6 hours of sleep a night, it increases their risk for diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, osteoporosis, and the list just goes on and on. With sleep apnea, in particularly where people may not be getting enough oxygen, that's definitely a risk factor for heart disease. And similarly with sleep apnea and with insomnia, garden variety insomnia, where people just aren't sleeping enough hours because either they're stressed or they can't get in a comfortable position because they're in pain, or because for different reasons we can touch on. There are quite a few reasons why people might not be getting enough sleep due to insomnia. But either of those conditions, you get increased inflammation going on in the body. You also get an increase in risk for accidents because people just aren't as alert. They're groggier, so it increases their risk for driving. When people have insomnia, sleep deprivation, the studies show, is as dangerous as drunk driving when people are behind the wheel. And in fact, there are multiple environmental catastrophes that have happened because those who are in charge of the machinery, whatever it was, managing the risk, didn't get enough sleep. The Exxon Valdez oil spill that happened in Alaska a few decades ago, that was now attributed to the captain being sleep deprived. The Bhopal toxic incident where at a chemical factory in India there was an explosion, they're attributing that to lack of sleep, or that was a contributing factor to this monitoring the situation. So on and on. And that's at a regional and global scale. But for people's everyday lives, it makes it less able, first of all, to enjoy your day and the people in your life. Research has shown also that people make poorer decisions. Their judgment is impaired. And again, it's a long list of health effects. Some of them end up in risk of dying early, and many of them more short-term are just people feel crummy and they're not enjoying all the blessings and everything that they have in their life.
Yeah. So I've been talking a lot recently about this concept. I'm labeling it radical wellness, because I feel that it's become so common for us to be tired, to be sick, to be our immune system having issues, to be feeling depressed. It's so common that it's like, oh, that's just how life is. And so when you are on this journey to bettering your health and you see someone who's eating well and maybe they're doing the steps and they're feeling vibrant and good, to a lot of people, it seems a little radical because, well, this is your lifestyle. It's very different than what's kind of our cultural norm. So I'm curious, with the culture that is very fast paced, that we're very caffeinated. And I think that we sometimes don't have a lot of that space in our day to have this self-awareness around are we getting enough sleep? Because we're just kind of going on autopilot, I find. And I'm curious, how would you bring awareness to a particular individual that they might be having sleep issues and they're not aware of it? Because if they don't have sleep apnea, like, well, I don't have sleep apnea, I don't have narcolepsy, I don't have, insomnia, self-diagnosing, of course, what are symptoms or signs that someone may be having an issue, and maybe it's not chronic, or maybe it's just something that could start to become a regular pattern? What are the first signs that we need to look and address our sleep and do something?
That's a fantastic question, and nobody's ever asked me that question before, and I love it because people can check in with themselves, and it makes it easy. So let me give you some very simple ideas for the listeners that they can think about. So there are two phases to sleep. I mean, they're technically different stages, and we can talk about, more superficial people who sleep lightly versus those deep sleepers. But in general, there's the time of the night where you're falling asleep, and there's the time of the night when hopefully you're staying asleep. On average, it takes people about 30 minutes to fall asleep. Adults. Now, babies, if you have children like I do, when they were little, I mean, it was incredible. I was so jealous. They'd be sitting there eating in the middle of a bite, and they conk out in a deep sleep. It's incredible. They go straight to that deep stage of sleep. For adults, however, it takes a little longer. So the average amount of time it takes for somebody to fall asleep is about 30 minutes. So if it's taking you 45 minutes, 60 minutes, you're tossing and turning, you can't get in a comfortable position, or you're just laying there and your mind is racing and won't turn off, for whatever reason, that can be an indicator that you're having a bit of a struggle. Then once you are asleep, if you find yourself waking up in the middle of the night multiple times, getting up to go to the bathroom, really typically not that big of a deal, as long as you can fall back asleep. But if you find yourself waking up multiple times and then staring at the ceiling, have a hard time even once falling back asleep. I mean, not one night. I mean, you wake up one time consistently, and then you're just awake for hours, 30 minutes, an hour, couple hours, and you just have a hard time falling back asleep. That's a problem that hopefully can be addressed. If you find yourself waking up in the morning and hitting that snooze button, multiple times, you're not getting enough sleep. If you find yourself waking up in the morning and just dragging and feeling groggy, for a couple of hours, you may not be getting enough sleep. Now, you can be in bed for 8 hours. You may even be asleep for 7 or 7.5 hours. But if you're not getting into that deep restorative sleep, you may wake up groggy. One of the ways to understand if you're getting into that deep sleep is that when people are in the stage 3 and stage 4 of sleep, it's harder to wake them up. So if you are getting woken up by every slight noise in your room or that you hear, you are likely in a lighter stage 1 or stage 2 phase of sleep, in which case your body doesn't get into those deep stages that are required to restore the body. Not just to restore the body, but that's where also memory is consolidated. So it's not just physical health, it's mental health as well that's important. If you find yourself really needing to nap during the day, you may not be getting enough sleep. Now, there are cultures around the world that do naps, and I'm a huge fan of naps. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're not getting enough sleep, but it's another thing to just consider and take a look at. If you've got brain fog, if you've got depression, those may indicate that you're not getting enough sleep. Maybe sleep is the main culprit for those things. Maybe not. There could be other things going on as well. But looking at your sleep is one important part of the puzzle to figuring that out.
I often ask a question for clientele that come in about their sleep. I ask them about how was your sleep? And when I see some of these markers, I wonder if they're actually getting into these deep stages. And I'm curious because I've had clients that have said, I dream all night. I don't easily wake up. I'm fine. I can fall asleep, but I dream all night. It's vivid dreams. And I often think to myself, is that potentially like they're just stuck in theta REM sleep, that's actually potentially they may not be going into deep sleep if they're dreaming vividly and it feels like, a marathon of dreams every single night. Do you have any information about that?
Yeah, that's great. I've never thought about that before. One thing that I would be curious about with these people is, two things. One, are they really processing information? Do they have a lot going on in their mind where their brain is working overtime to try and solve something that's going on for them, and they just happen to stay in that REM stage? It may be that they're not really in the REM stage that long, but they remember it. That's what they remember. So without doing a quantitative sleep study, where you can tell which stage you're in and for the duration of time, that sort of report from a patient, I would take as a grain of salt. I would interpret it as they're interested in learning more about their sleep. This is a fantastic opportunity to have the conversation. What are you eating before bed? What is your sleep quality like, your quantity? Would you like to do a sleep study? We can arrange that. But in terms of that report, and they're saying, I'm just dreaming all night, you know, sleep is a funny thing. When we're all in sleep, the time kind of gets warped and it's hard to know exactly how long you've been asleep, how long you've been awake, and that sort of thing.
Now, if someone doesn't have sleep apnea, but they're a snorer, there's a lot of snorers out there. If you have a partner that's a snorer and it affects your sleep, but the people who snore, I'm curious, does that, that noise, if they are they able to generally get into these different stages of sleep, even with the noise of their own auditory sounds they're making?
So I'm a snorer, full disclosure, and struggled with it for years. By the way, as a little aside, I find that it's better when I avoid dairy, by
Okay.
and large, and I sleep a little bit propped up, and that makes it better. But I don't. It could, but it may not. Again, a sleep study could determine that. And if somebody is snoring because their airway is slightly clogged, it could be an early sign of sleep apnea. It could be a mild sleep apnea. So, teasing those apart, if somebody wants to dive deeper and really understand it better, a sleep study could help define that and help shed some light into that situation. But I track my sleep. I have tracked my sleep in the past. I'm not doing it now. And yes, I can tell you, even with snoring, I'm getting into this deeper stage 3 and stage 4 sleep.
That's amazing. So let's talk about tracking your sleep then with these different devices. And again, real quick, we talked about in the last episode, that everyone is individual, that we address people with, you're looking at their blood panels, you're looking at their lifestyle. So if you have not listened to that episode, the one size fits all approach is not this functional integrative approach. So it's just important to remember that as Dr. Neustadt's talking about these sleep studies and looking at these deeper reasons and looking at your mental health, what's going on in your life and what are you eating. So we're going to go more into that because I really want to ask the question about foods too, but I want to ask first about tracking because there's a lot of different sleep tracking devices. Do they work and are they helpful? And what information can be used with those devices to bring to their doctors to support if they need treatment or anything like that?
That's a great question. So I reviewed tracking apps about 2 years ago. So since then, there are more. When I say I reviewed them for a medical journal who was interested in understanding if they've been validated and what the state of the technology is. So it's been a couple of years, and I'm sure things have hopefully improved since then. What I learned at the time is that there really is no standardization in terms of they're measuring themselves not necessarily off of FDA approved parameters and variables, but off of their own technology and their own definitions of what they want to measure. There are lots of different apps out there you can get if you have a smartphone, which I believe most people do at this point, that can track it. So one thing that I would think about is it just on the table next to you, your phone? And what it does, it'll pick up the sound of you moving around and you're snoring. And it then estimates the stages you're in and how long. Because when people are in those deeper stages of sleep, they're not moving around as much.
Yeah.
Then there are devices like the Oura Ring, Oura, which people can wear to bed. And that can track your pulse and that can help track your sleep as well and communicate that with your phone. I think most importantly, when people are trying to evaluate it, first of all, look and see if they do state that they're using technology that's been validated, but most importantly, that you're using it consistently, right? So you can track over time. And even if there's an error, even though it's not perfect, If you're using the same device over time, what you'll get is a trend, at least, from that device that can then prompt you, if you want to get something more official, you can reach out to your doctor. Or there are even companies and clinics out there who will send you a device or will do this remotely, even without a doctor's order, and assist you with that and learning more about your sleep patterns.
Wonderful. Yeah, my partner has the Aura Ring and he really enjoys that, and it's been very supportive for him. I know he's had struggled with insomnia, so that's something that at least he's been able to track with that. That's great. So let's talk about the foods and talk about things that might interrupt sleep that are common for people that maybe they're eating or that are affecting their sleep quality.
One of the things about tracking people's sleep is they can then, if you're experimenting with foods or other ways of improving your sleep, you can see the data. I mean, hopefully you'll be feeling better too, and you'll recognize it. But people who are driven by data, they can actually then see, is this having an effect on my sleep? So there are 5 foods that most commonly cause heartburn. And heartburn will wake somebody it up. It's that substernal, in the chest, the burning. But you don't have to have the burning. If you have a dry hacking cough when you're laying down, it's considered what's called positional. So when you're laying down, you get a dry hacking cough. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you're coughing, it could be that you're breathing acid from your stomach. It's going up your esophagus, and you're actually aspirating it or getting it into breathing it into your lungs, and it's irritating your lungs and it causes you to cough.
Wow.
So the 5 foods that are most commonly caused this are caffeine, chocolate, tomato and tomato products, raw garlic and onions, and citrus. Peppermint can be a trigger for some people. And of course, it can be unique to the individual. So there could be foods that are triggers for any individual, and they just need to, through trial and error, try and identify what those might be. Drinking caffeine late at night or in the afternoon, if you're more sensitive, can keep people awake and disturb their sleep. If you drink before you go to bed, if you drink water before you go to bed, you may wake up to go to the bathroom at the middle of the night. I tell people if they need to take medication right before they go to bed, just drink the minimum required to get it down. And one thing, if you're waking up to pee in the middle of the night, that I tell people is just stop drinking liquids 2 hours before you go to bed and see if that helps. If that doesn't work, well, try 3 hours. Try 4 if you can, and see if that helps. Now, for men, they may have a prostate issue going on that's waking them up to go to the bathroom at night. And men over 50 who have not had a prostate exam should talk to their doctor about that, especially if they have signs of potential BPH, which is prostate gland enlargement. And signs of that may be not being able to completely void when you urinate, meaning you feel like there's still some left in your bladder, urinating more frequently, waking up in the middle of the night multiple times to go to the bathroom, incomplete voiding or dribbling a little bit after. All of those can be potential symptoms of or signs of BPH, and that can affect men's sleep. Women don't have a prostate gland, so that's not an issue. What women do get, though, are hot flashes from perimenopause. And so when women, it's very common in women as they go through menopause and the estrogen's dropping, to be woken up in the middle of the night with hot flashes. So there are certain things that have been shown to help that. Exercise can help with hot flashes. Bioidentical hormone replacement, just getting the hormones back in the normal physiological range, can help with that. And integrative doctors, naturopathic doctors who specialize in women's health also can recommend and provide some herbs and vitamins and other supplementation that have clinical trials on them that have been also shown to help with hot flashes in perimenopausal women. So those are things to look out for in those age groups, with men BPH, with women looking at perimenopause. Sleep hygiene is really important. Making sure that the room is at an adequate temperature. And typically you're looking at about 68, 69 degrees, but it's individual. So at a good temperature for sleep. Making sure that it's a dark room, that it's a quiet room. Although for some people, quiet can be too quiet, and it's not a great sleep environment. So you can get a white noise machine like I have. I find that's helpful for me. Or you can even get a white noise app on your phone. I'm not a fan for sleeping with your phone next to your bed unless you absolutely have to, in which case I recommend it's more than an arm's distance away, because being on your phone right before bed or in the middle of the night, if you wake up, affects sleep. What we know is that it reduces melatonin production. And people who are on their devices before they go to sleep, there's a clinical trial that's been shown that it only took them about 10 minutes more to fall asleep, which when I read it, I'm like, well, big deal. Okay. But what happened was, compared to the people who were reading good old fashioned paper books, those who were reading a book on their e-reader before bed, it took them hours longer to feel fully awake the next day, hours longer, which means they weren't getting into that deep restorative sleep that the body needs to feel refreshed in the morning. So that's, I think, a good overview and some specifics about not just food, but other things that can affect sleep.
Now, what about screens as well? That may be your computer screen or your television, because I know that those also put off blue light that affects the melatonin. Is that also included other than just the mobile devices and your Kindle?
So I do personally include laptops in that. I put phones, iPads, or tablets. Because of the distance people sit away from televisions, I don't typically consider that the issue. That's my own opinion, and I don't know of any data or studies that look specifically at that. But what I do know is that the things that people watch at night before bed can be stimulating and can be aggravating and can be emotional triggers for people. So my preference and my routine in the middle of the night is I turn off all devices at least an hour before bed, and I'm interacting with my family, or I'm reading a book, or I go for a walk in the evening to calm down, or I'm sitting in the backyard. Something just more relaxing, more trying to identify what my body needs in terms of the rhythms, because historically, prior to the invention of 24/7 lights, where you just flip a switch and you've got light, when the sun went down, our bodies started preparing for sleep. And our hormones, the circadian or daily rhythm of our hormones, still want to mimic that. Meaning, as the sun goes down, what happens is it gets darker. Melatonin in the evening starts going up and starts preparing us for sleep. Cortisol typically is lower at night. And so when people are doing things that are really stimulating, like watching television or doing sports at night, cortisol can go up and it can keep people awake. So just, I think, being respectful of and listening to your body, which in our culture, you talked about, in our culture and people, being sleep deprived, one of the unfortunate things and phenomenon that I think we all experience is there seems to be a badge of honor of the more I do, the more successful I am. Not the better the person I am, the more successful I am. And so what that does is people are working till all hours of the night, and they wake up and they're working early in the morning, or there's this type A drive where they're doing these really vigorous activities late at night right before bed. And all of that can really wreak havoc on what our body naturally is programmed to do and wants to do. And people are so much in their heads, most people I talk to, and I'm no saint, I'm guilty of this as well. I've had to learn as an adult to slow down. I've had to learn as an adult how to get it more out of my head and listen to more of the signals my body's telling me what I really need. Your body has wisdom, and it was talking to you all the time. And too often, people are just ignoring it and staying intellectually in their head, or sweeping those symptoms, sweeping those messages under the rug. And I think it's important for us to listen more to what our body needs. There's a lot of wisdom there.
I completely agree. Most of our listeners are self-identified as highly sensitive people or empathic, and they struggle with being in their heads. We say we're disembodied, having a hard time being aware of the body. And as a massage therapist, we find that that's the same thing, that most people are very unaware of their physical form and what it needs. And that's kind of the blessing of what we do. And what you're doing here is we want to help people educate the wisdom of the body. It's so powerful, all the messages it has for us. The answers are always there. So yeah, I wanted to talk briefly about alcohol before bed. That one I think is common. And then people who leave the TV on at night to sleep, almost like that background noise instead of a white noise machine. Because those are things that I know are very common.
Those are great questions. Before I do that, I just want to address one thing that I found to be very helpful for me in terms of getting out of my head and getting out of my own way. So actually two things. The first is asking better questions. So one thing that I found helpful when I feel like I'm not present in a room because my mind's going somewhere else, a mile a minute thinking about tomorrow or yesterday or some conversation I had earlier or something like that, or worrying about something, I ask myself, am I here? Am I present when I notice that? And it immediately brings me back to the room I'm in. And sometimes I'll say, what are three things in this room, to identify three things in the room, bring me back in the present. And then sometimes I'll ask myself, what do I need to feel better? What do I need to feel more connected and calmer? Because what happens is our mind is always looking for the answers to the questions we ask it. It will give you the answers. So if you're asking, why am I so disconnected from my body? Why can't I be present? Your brain is going to tell you why and just reinforce that same message. So just flipping the script a little bit, just learning how to ask more empowering questions that are going to give you the answers to be moving in the direction that you want to be heading in, is such a powerful, simple things that we can all do. The second thing I found that really helps me is going for walks, and not just sitting and meditating, because that hasn't worked traditionally very well for me. But what I do when I go for my walks in nature specifically, it's important, for me, and for a lot of people, to connect with nature. And in fact, there's research showing those health benefits. It's called grounding. And nature in Japan is actually a prescription. It's prescribed for people with health challenges to go into nature.
Wow.
One of the things that I do when I'm walking now, which is a relatively recent thing, and I love this development for myself, is I have on iTunes, there's a meditation playlist. And I just play that meditation. I'm not playing, my playlist of music with lyrics and whatever beats, going on. I'm playing a meditation playlist, and I'm just walking, and I'm focusing on noticing what's around me. And that has been incredibly helpful for me. And your question about alcohol is a good one. What happens are a couple of things. One, alcohol will help people feel tired initially. It's a sedative, but it messes with people's blood sugar. So your blood sugar goes up. There's a lot of sugar in alcohol and in drinks with alcohol. And then the blood sugar drops, and your body then secretes epinephrine to release blood sugar that's stored in the body. And it also wakes you up. So it's really not a good thing. Looking at trying to use alcohol to sleep better is destructive. It's not helping you. In terms of, what was the other thing that you asked?
Sleeping with the television on as a background noise.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say that's a good question, and I'm not sure. I would say if you want to know the effect it has, be your best experiment. I think people should experiment with themselves and see what works best for them. Get a tracking device. See if you're sleeping with the television on, what that sleep pattern looks like, and then sleep for a while without it on. Not just one night, because there may need a transition. Maybe do a week or 2 weeks without the television, or maybe with a white noise machine instead, and get the data so you can make better decisions.
Perfect. Love it. And I just want to comment, thank you so much for talking about asking different questions. That was actually one of the things in our last episode that you said, but pertaining to reversing anxiety and depression with functional medicine was the topic. So asking different questions when it comes to that. And I think that your personal things that you do to get yourself grounded into the physical space, I think are really important. I think most of the time when we work with clients, they struggle with meditation because they have this understanding that it is sitting there and closing their eyes and having to just,
Yeah.
go somewhere. And they have a hard time because they can't stop thinking. And so I think that embodied meditation, walking, staring at a candle flame, something where you have something to focus your mind on to get that mind to still. So I love that you incorporate your meditation into your walks. I think that's really powerful. So let's move into talking about things from a functional integrative approach for helping sleep, whether it's diet, food, supplementation. Common things I know people do take are, melatonin. That's something that people are more, it's a household term now. Let's take melatonin to sleep. What are the things that you usually see that work? And are there any potential side effects with long-term taking some of these supplements?
Understanding the functional approach really means understanding how the biochemistry works to influence and impact sleep. And I mentioned this, I believe, last time, but I'll mention it again. Biochemistry, people get whole PhDs in it, so it can be very complicated, but very simply, it's how the body uses vitamins, minerals, fats, and proteins to do its job, and how things like infections and allergies and other things can impact, environmental toxins can impact that and cause challenges and problems. From a sleep perspective with functional medicine, I think about what is required for the production of melatonin. Our body can produce melatonin. Our body can produce serotonin. What are the raw materials that are necessary for that? But it's not just that one molecule. Sleep is a complicated physiological process and phenomenon that involves different aspects of our biochemistry. So there's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. You're looking at, for example, cortisol, your stress hormone. That's part of it. You're looking at anxiety and what are some nutrients or signaling molecules in our biochemistry that help calm that nervous system down, and how can we use that to our advantage? So one of the challenges with melatonin and why it's really not the best solution is because it's only one piece of a more complicated puzzle. And melatonin historically is understood to be the hormone that helps prepare us for sleep, gets our body ready to go to sleep, but it's not what maintains sleep throughout the night. And it has a very short half-life, maybe about an hour and 15 minutes, something like that. So what happens if you take 3 milligrams of melatonin, an hour later, you are down to 1.5 milligrams in your body, assuming that you actually absorb 100% of that. So the half-life is how long does it take for 50% of the substance to be metabolized and eliminated from your body? Melatonin has a short half-life. So 2 hours later, you've got less than 1 milligram in your body, and so on and so forth. And so what people experience often with melatonin is they wake up in the middle of the night. And so then they take a higher dose and a higher dose. And they keep taking ever higher doses of melatonin till it just knocks them out. And then they wake up feeling groggy and hungover the next morning. Well, that's because that's not what melatonin is used for in the body. So part of it is identifying, from a functional approach, it's not just what is the biochemistry, but it's what's happening physiologically during different stages of sleep. So I mentioned, for example, cortisol being secreted, and it releases sugar that's stored in the body, but it also wakes you up. So people's blood sugar is dropping in the middle of the night. Well, that's something that needs to be dealt with. And one of the best ways to deal with regulating blood sugar is to consume protein. Now, I own a dietary supplement company. I formulated a product specifically for sleep, but I am the first to tell you that a dietary supplement should be used as the FDA intended, as a supplement to a good diet. If you can fix this with diet, even better. You are so much farther ahead. So what we know with diet and the impact on blood sugar regulation, if you were to consume protein before bed, it may solve the problem. And I use this a lot with my patients. I like things, we all have protein at home. We all have food. If you can use what you've already got, then do it. So I would start with that. If somebody is having a difficult time staying asleep in the middle of the night, not falling asleep, staying asleep. They're waking up about the same time every night. I would tell them just consume 8 to 10 grams of protein before bed and see if that does the trick. Now, most of the time it didn't work, maybe 10% of the time, but that 10% of the time, when it did work, it's a home run, right? You solved the problem. If it didn't work, there are other things we can try. There are herbs, there's supplements that can be used to help with that. But overall, why melatonin isn't the best approach is because it's not targeting the different stages of sleep. I struggled with insomnia for years, horrible insomnia. So I've tried so many things out there, and one of the biggest requests I got from my customers with MBI was a new sleep product. So obviously it wasn't just me who was having the problem of trying things and maybe it worked for a little while and then stopped working or just not finding that combination. So I dove into the research on the physiology and the biochemistry and the neurology of insomnia and sleep issues. And what I ended up creating was a product called Sleep Relief. It's a biphasic time relief tablet because, again, the two big phases of sleep, falling asleep and staying asleep, there are different nutrients and different things physiologically going on. So it targets both of those. So phase 1 is a quick release to help people fall asleep. And then phase 2 is a slow release over about 4 hours to release its nutrients to help people stay asleep. Or if they wake up, to fall asleep more easily. And hopefully they wake up in the morning and they feel refreshed and not groggy and hungover because I've timed the half-life of the different nutrients that are in there to wear off, where people just wake up and they're ready for their day.
Yeah. Now my son is on the autism spectrum, and we did give him that supplement. He did really well with that. We do that, and we do a topical magnesium that's transdermal, so he just gets a little, through his skin, and that seems to really just, rubbing his feet and calming his nervous system down. That seems to work well. So I just wanted to just kind of attest to that supplement. It definitely he really enjoys that. So, cause he's 16 now. So, the 16-year-old stressors of life and those things, of course, are also contributing to his sleep too. Yeah. So I wanted to share that.
And I'm glad you mentioned magnesium. I love magnesium. And it's used for hundreds of things in the body, hundreds of biochemical processes. One of the things, and why it's in sleep relief as one of the nutrients that it does, is it helps relax muscles. It's a smooth muscle relaxant. And so if somebody's feeling, tension in their shoulders or their back, if they're holding tension, that's part of the combination of nutrients that just sort of helps the body relax and get into a more comfortable position to sleep.
Perfect. So is there anything else with functional approach to sleep that you want to share about? My last question today will be talking about what's our sleep hygiene? What does it look like? Because I think it'd be helpful for the audience to kind of hear a little bit more of examples for themselves. But is there anything else before we go into that you want to share about the functional approach?
I would love to tell your listeners about the data that Fitbit evaluated. So Fitbit, makes these wearable devices, a sleep tracker device. They have access to billions of data points from their users. And they ask the question, what is the most predictive variable for a good night's sleep? Is it somebody's age? Is it their gender? What is it? What they found after crunching and looking at all these billions of data points, that it was none of that. The most important variable for a good night's sleep is going to bed at about the same time. You're training your body to go to bed. What happens is people during the week, they tend to go to bed at about the same time because they have their obligations, work or school, whatever it is. But when Friday night comes around, Saturday night comes around, they're staying up later. And by the time Sunday night rolls around, their body feels as if it's actually flown to another time zone and has now learned to stay up later. They've termed this social jet lag. So going to bed at the same time every night and getting your body on that schedule is the best predictor for consistently good sleep.
I love that. That is absolutely true in my own experience, for sure. Definitely, for sure. My routine for sleep has been, I do yoga before bed. I do gentle yoga, and I listen to some nice relaxing music. I usually journal. I love journaling. I love reading. So that's my kind of journey. And if I'm really having a hard time, I can feel it in my tissue. If I'm really tight, I will take some magnesium. That really does help. And I love that you talked about that as a muscle relaxant. The other thing that I do before bed sometimes is I do body brushing, which is a little bit stimulating, but I do it just on the bottoms of my feet to kind of calm my nervous system. For me, it gets me more aware of my body, out of my head, to bring awareness to the body. And that's why I do yoga before bed. In the past, I've taken so many different things, like, sleep issues. You said for yourself, you were trying all these different things as well and looking at that. But the one thing that I really love, that it's kind of fun to note, is before I was very busy and not in more of a routine with my life as a business owner, I didn't always make my bed. And
Mm.
for me, making my bed in the morning, every single morning, not missing out, that rhythm, that ritual is really, really big for me. I make my bed, and then of course it's just lovely. It's a really nice, beautiful experience getting into my bed. I have really soft blankets. I have a beautiful sheepskin blanket on top that just is really, it's really helpful for my nervous system. And I'm very sensual in the way I process things. I love the colors. I love textures. So that to me makes my sleep a beautiful ritual. Sometimes I'll use essential oil sprays. Like, I just love all the sounds and sights and smells to integrate into my sleep. It's like my sacred space, like my bed. It is the most sacred space for me. And the one other thing I do use is I have an infrared mat, that infrared heat therapy, that really does seem to help, especially if I've gone to the gym later at night and afterwards I lay on that, and it really does seem to calm and down regulate my nervous system a lot. So those are the things I do. I just wanted to share so people have some more ideas of just some different things that worked for me. Again, everyone's individual and it's unique for you. But to finish out the episode, Dr. John, I'd love to hear about your journey and some of the things you are currently doing for your personal sleep ritual.
I love that you mentioned things that I didn't talk about, because there are so many options out there. And there's no way that I could talk about all of them on this episode, or that I even know about all of them.
Yep.
And I love the emphasis that people should find out what works best for them and just keep trying till you get it right. A weighted blanket, I haven't mentioned, I found to be very helpful. Weighted blankets can be great if that works for you. And for me, with my routine, I'm in bed and lights out at 9:30 or 10. I find that I feel my best, and it influenced my sleep when I'm consistently in bed, lights out at 9:30 or 10. I'm typically up at 5 or 5:30. I'm the first one up in my house. It's great. It's my quiet time. I get up, I read for a half hour, I journal, I get through my emails so I don't have that hanging over my head, and I can focus on longer projects. And then in the evening, I disconnect from work, and it's so easy to be connected 24 hours a day. I don't reply to emails. I won't answer texts, and I'm with my family, or I'm doing something for myself. Part of my routine is walking. Almost every day, 6 or 7 days a week, I'm going for a walk, just like I mentioned. I also exercise, and that helps me with my sleep. And I think an important thing that's helped me too is I've stopped watching the news. It is so toxic and so negative. I will pull up the news app and I'll look at the headlines and I'll read a couple of stories here and there, but I am not plugged into the news as much. I know what I need to know for my life and for my family, and that's good enough. And that's helped me get that toxicity out of my life. The other thing too, in terms of just overall getting, reducing stress so I sleep better and have better quality of life, is getting good boundaries. Being able to say no easier, setting those boundaries and communicating them well, communicating them to people, because people get what they tolerate. And so if you're feeling stressed and it's impacting your sleep, or you're saying yes to too many things and you're overscheduled and it's impacting your sleep, cutting back and starting to learn and work towards having healthier boundaries and honoring what you need That's an important thing for not only fixing your sleep, but your mood and your energy and your outlook and so many things in life.
All right, Dr. Neustadt, tell us a little about how we can reach you and what resources you may have that may support learning more about sleep health and functional approach and integrated approach.
People can go to my website, my NBI website, which is nbihealth.com, nbihealth.com. On there are tons of free informational resources for people, blogs, special reports. There's a special report on sleep, in fact, that people can download a PDF file. I have my own podcast, so there are podcast episodes. Sleep Relief is there if you want to try it. Calm and Clear is another formula that I created that helps people better manage stress, calms an overactive nervous system, helps rebalance the adrenal glands. And so those are products that I've created. But in addition, there are just tons of free resources, educational resources for people to find out what they can do to improve their health, not just with sleep, but many other things as well.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. Thank you guys again for listening, and be well until next time, my friends. Thank you for listening to the Mind Body Detox podcast. We wish you wellness and health in your mind, body, and spirit. And be well until next time, my friends.